Oops, I think that was the wrong footage. So, hello and welcome to this video. I'm Vera.
And I'm Spaghetti Spaghetti. And this is the first time we're making a video like this, so it's going to be a bit rough around the edges. Please excuse us for that. However, we are very keen and excited to get this video done and to present you with Europe's best cycle routes. So here we are, and we'll just do our best.
There are many reasons we chose the Lake Constance Cycle Route to begin with.
First of all, it's Europe's most popular cycling route, attracting over 1 million cyclists every year.
So it's no surprise that YouTube is full of documentaries and vlogs from people who have biked around the lake.
However, while doing research for this video, we didn't find any showcasing the route in winter.
Of course, winter isn't the preferred season for cycling. Most people come in summer, which makes more sense, as swimming, sailing and cycling are certainly more enjoyable in warmer temperatures.
But that means most people miss out on the dark, almost mystical atmosphere that the surroundings have to offer. That's why we can confidently say we'll show you images of Europe's most popular cycle route like you've never seen it before, even if you've been here before.
Ironically, even in summer, most people miss out on many things when passing through here.
This is mainly because tourist officers recommend circling the lake clockwise, keeping the water on your right hand side. There's no obvious reason for that, as both directions are equally appealing.
However, this means the segment we're going to present usually just gets passed by, with most people focused on finishing their trip after a long and intense ride. A result, they don't give things the same level of attention they had at the start.
Additionally, many of the points of interest are somewhat inconspicuous, so we'd like to highlight some often overlooked attractions that might be worth your while if you decide to try out this route.
And these are things you can do on a low budget, which might be especially important since Switzerland is known for being expensive.
That reputation can make many cyclists, especially the ones from Germany, anxious about stopping, as if the gnomes of Zurich were lurking behind a tree, just ready to snatch your hard-earned money the moment you stop. But as you'll see, that's not entirely true.
On another note, I have to admit this route is an easy choice for us, since we're very familiar with it. It's practically in our backyard. In fact, the route passes right by our doorstep.
That's a great advantage because close proximity means we can quickly return home for a warm mug of tea and snuggle under the covers if we get too cold.
And since we're still figuring out how to approach making this kind of video and practicing our filming skills, starting on familiar ground seems like a good idea.
This route is also perfect for beginners who want to try travelling by bike for the first time, which aligns well with us being beginners at making these sort of reports.
Last but not least, this route is of a generally high standard, so we'd like to use it as a benchmark when evaluating other cycle routes in the future.
The route we'd like to introduce is just a small segment of the complete Lake Constance Cycle Route, covering 20 kilometres out of the route's total of roughly 270. As we mentioned earlier, most people cycle the lake clockwise, but we'll be going in the opposite direction, starting in Kreuzlingen and finishing in Romanshorn, about halfway down the Swiss side of the lake shore.
The Lake Constance Cycle Route is more commonly known as the Bodensee Radweg. It's a well-established route with a long history. In fact, it was first marked over 40 years ago, making it one of the first recreational cycle routes ever created. Spanning 3 countries, it was also the first international cycle route.
More recently, the segment we're highlighting became part of the EuroVelo 15, also called the Rhine route. This route stretches more than 1,200 kilometers, starting from the river's source in Andermatt in the Alps and ending at the North Sea coast in Hoek van Holland. In Switzerland, The Rhine route is designated as Swiss National Route Number 2.
It also connects to other significant cycle routes. For example, it links with Swiss national routes 41 and 55, both starting in Kreuzlingen. Route 41 ends in Meilen on Lake Zurich, while Route 55 leads to St. Gallen, running parallel to Lake Constance but at higher altitudes.
The other connection is in Altnau, where you can branch off onto Route 922, which leads to Bürglen on the Thur River, just 14 kilometers to the south.
Finally, the route meets Swiss National Route number 5, which begins in Romanshorn and runs all the way to Lausanne on Lake Geneva, the only lake in Central Europe larger than Lake Constance.
So, if you choose this route, you're not limited to just circling the lake. You have access to a variety of connections and combinations when planning your trip, offering options you might not have considered before.
But before we depart to go along the lake, we'll give you a quick tour of where we live.
Up to the 19th century, Kreuzlingen consisted of 4 small hamlets under the jurisdiction of the Bishop of Constance. In 1803, Napoleon drew the border along Constance's southern perimeter, assigning the hamlets to the newly formed canton of Thurgau, making it part of the Swiss Confederation. It wasn't until the mid-19th century that the name Kreuzlingen was applied to one of the hamlets, and it took many decades for it to develop into anything resembling a town. The colourful ribbons are for Fasnacht, the local carnival which is going to take place soon.
Today, 23,000 people call Kreuzlingen home. However, lacking a long history, it isn't what I would call picturesque. What stands out, though, is its striking international character, with over 50% of its population being immigrants who live here peacefully.
We could go on a tangent about what it's like to live in a city divided by a border. It does offer some very unique and remarkable experiences, but instead we'll focus on a few things that might be helpful for you if you visit the area.
For example, the language. You might assume that because the cities are so close to one another, everyone speaks the same. If you speak German, you won't have any difficulty in Constance. However, in Switzerland, we speak a German dialect that sounds quite different. So, don't be surprised if you find it hard to understand.
Most people will gladly switch to High German or even English if they notice you're struggling, but you might still encounter some written phrases and dialect, since Swiss German has no formal written rules. Phonetically written statements can be tricky to decipher. This goes beyond the diminutive "ly" ending which Germans often mock the Swiss for, because Swiss German, as it's generally called, features a wide range of unique vocabulary, grammar, structures, intonations, and even influences from French and more recently, of course, English.
In Swiss German, Kreuzlingen is pronounced Kreuzlinge. The Swiss take great pride in preserving their spoken dialects, as they are an important part of their cultural identity. I deliberately use the plural dialect because there are many across Switzerland, which often sparks debates. The dialect spoken in this region is arguably one of the least popular.
So, we cycled all up the hill so that you can have a magnificent vantage point overlooking the wonderful lake. And look what we see. And I tell you something, I almost died on the way up here, so it's a good thing we're at the cemetery, right? As we were talking of differences between the German and the Swiss sides of the lake, another curious one is the perception of the climate. Germans often describe the region as having an attractive Mediterranean-like climate. Meanwhile, the Swiss tend to scoff, claiming it's always rainy, cloudy, and horrible grey. I guess they're right somewhere.
The Lake Constance region experiences a typical Western Central European climate. Though the vast body of water can have a cooling effect during summer. One thing to watch out for, however, is the wind. The prevailing winds mostly come from the west or the northeast. The northeastern wind, known as Bise, can feel quite chilly when it gains strength. It often causes inversions in winter, leading to a thick layer of impenetrable fog that blocks out the sun for most of the day, and sometimes for weeks at a time. As we can't see the lake from here, we will have to go back to the shore.
So, with a wave of our magic wand, we got rid of all the fog and now we have sunny blue skies. Isn't that amazing? So this is where we're starting our route, at the Swiss-German border. On the other side there's Germany, we're standing in Switzerland. So this is certainly one of the weak points of the route, and many people will get confused which way to go to access the city centre of Constance. And some are even confused what country they're in. So as you can see, the markings here are hidden by the parking spot. In this case, we have a camper, so you really can't see anything. And the sign leading for the continuation of the route is well hidden as well. So no wonder people get confused. Also, the street leading to the bicycle path poses all sorts of hazards and dangers for cyclists. So this part should be under reconsideration for a redesign that is more compatible with cycling.
Before we continue, we should pump up our tires. There's a petrol station with an electronic pressure gauge just down the street that can help us out.
Keeping your tires inflated to the correct pressure is crucial, as it reduces friction that can make cycling more strenuous. Many people tend to underestimate its importance. This is especially true if you're using an e-bike. While you might not notice the added effort, the motor will compensate by draining the battery faster, ultimately reducing your range. If you're unsure about how much air pressure to put in your tires, the recommended pressure is usually indicated on the side wall. Here it is, under a bit of dirt. Somewhere around here. For my tyres, it's usually between 3 and 5 bar. I usually inflate mine to 4.5. I've tried going up to 5 before, but the inner tube exploded after a sudden temperature spike, even ripping the tyre apart.
The start of this cycle route is far from ideal. While a designated cycle path is in place, it's common for cyclists to be overlooked by car drivers, entering or exiting the harbour parking lot. Despite the presence of markings and warning signs, many cyclists are unaware of the potential dangers. This is especially problematic in the summer, when the area is crowded with tourists, leading to numerous near misses and close calls.
So, but as we've already reached the first highlight of the day, let's distract ourselves from such pitfalls, and we're going to introduce you to the Seeburgpark, one of the most delightful spots dotting the shoreline. But we'll have to lock up our bike so that we don't get into trouble or annoy anyone, because cycling in the park is strictly prohibited.
You would hardly believe it, but this lovely park used to be a rubbish tip up until the 1970s. In 1958, a referendum was held in order to revamp the area, and the result was decided by a slim margin of 28 votes. Most of the park used to be the grounds of a castle erected in 1598, which still stands. A restaurant caters for weddings, conferences and meetings, and some of the rooms are used by the University of Constance.
Just around the corner is the youth hostel, offering a panoramic view of the lake and appearing grander than a youth hostel would suggest. And just below there is this postcard-perfect building housing a small nautical museum.
The park is teeming with animals, and the ravens, being the noisiest of them all, seem to be the rulers, sometimes giving the park the eerie and dense atmosphere of a Hitchcock movie. But there is also a large colony of herons that live here, and starlings like to gather here in autumn before they migrate south. Another winged species that resides here are bats, which are protected. These boxes might resemble common nesting boxes for birds, but are specially designed to accommodate for a bat's specific requirements. But the park also boasts a small zoo which is specialized in the conservation and breeding of rare farm animals like goats, woolly pigs, black-nosed sheep and donkeys. In addition, there is a pasture for highland cattle and multiple ponds for amphibians. And I haven't even started with the wide variety of Arctic birds that spend the winter months here on the lake.
The zoo, which is operated by a club and funded through donations, is free of charge and of course very popular with kids. And as there is a huge adventure playground waiting to get explored, this is the place to stop if you're travelling with your kids. Bring your own snacks though, as the snack bar is pricey.
So, now we're going to go up to the observation tower. And it's not very tall, so Slow Eddie Spaghetti can join me because we all know he's afraid of heights. Join me. Look.
Well, here I am. Yes,
Yes.
You may continue.
Yeah! He made it.
I did, but I'm out of breath.
So now we have a bird's eye view of the lake and its surroundings behind me. Over there is Constance, the largest city on the lake. It has a population of about 80,000. If you include Kreuzlingen, that adds up to over 100,000 living around the Bay Area. To the right is where you can see where the Rhine continues under the bridge.
The Lake of Constance goes by many different names. As you can't always see the opposite shoreline, especially in winter, the Germans often refer to it informally as the Swabian Sea, but its official name is of course the Bodensee. However, it's actually split into two lakes. The larger part, known as the Obersee or Upper Lake, what we can see now, and following that logic, the smaller part, known as the Untersee or Lower Lake.
The two are separated by a small landmass, originally consisting of marshland before everything got drained for agriculture and connected by the Rhine, which the locals call the Seerhein or Lake Rhine. The name Boden might sound like it has something to do with the word for floor, which would be an obvious translation, but is derived from the mountain ridge called Boden, which blocked the flow of water and forced it to turn west. The surrounding hills are moraines, formed by the glaciers that covered this region in the Ice Age.
Anyway, we've got so much more to show you, so let's leave the park and get moving. You'd think with all this water around there wouldn't be much need for artificial swimming pools, but here we are. This one's actually really popular, with slides and everything. Of course, it's closed in winter. I mean, who in their right mind wants to swim in these freezing temperatures?
The pool is right behind the campsite, which is super convenient since it's located directly along the cycle
Remember how we mentioned that 1 million tourists cycle around this lake every year? Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to debunk that claim, or at least question it. It seems this number is mostly spread by tourist officers for marketing purposes. Of course, by inflating the numbers, it makes it sound even more attractive than it is, because let's be honest, people do tend to follow the crowd. So this kind of marketing really works.
Anyway, even if it was 1 million, it's just an estimate. But we can actually give you a much more precise number, because the traffic here is electronically monitored. And guess what? The actual number is way lower than the one spouted by the marketing teams.
In 2022, there were 382,400 cyclists that passed here, and in 2023, it was 360,307. The number can vary, mainly due to the weather. So we're a long way from hitting 1 million, but there's no denying that cycling has become more popular. In 2012, the number was only 289,000, so it's definitely a positive trend.
And if you really want to get an accurate count of tourists, you'd need to subtract all the commuters heading to the hospital and psychiatric ward. And guess where we headed next? So this is where all the commuters cycle to. We're now on the grounds of the Cantonal Psychiatric Clinic. It has a pretty controversial past with some dark stories about non-consensual pharmaceutical experience on mentally disabled people and orphans that went on for much of the 20th century. On the flip side, it's also known for its high standards of treatment.
The clinic is part of a bigger unit that includes the hospital on the other side of the railway line. Together, they make up one of the largest institutions of the canton and are also one of the biggest employers. And fun fact, it's pretty much run by Germans, who are crucial to keeping Switzerland's healthcare system functioning.
It's certainly a bit ironic that such a beautiful complex is one of the last places anyone would want to end up. But here we are.
Now, the official route takes a detour around the grounds, so it often goes unnoticed by cyclists. But locals use it as a shortcut on their bikes, which is fine as long as you ride carefully and aren't causing a scene. And hey, we do recommend stopping here to enjoy the view. But now we're going to head up a bit further up the shoreline for our next stop.
The shoreline here is pretty steep and pebbly, with hardly any reed vegetation or inflows. These unique conditions actually make it a great spot for watching waterfowl that prefer deep, nutrient-poor waters during the winter months. Bird watchers really like this stretch and affectionately call it the diver stretch, because it's home to over 40 red-throated drivers, and sometimes even common loons drop by. But spotting these birds takes some patience and the right equipment. A good spotting scope, calm water, and clear visibility are a must. Besides the divers, there are also some rarer species in the area, like red-necked crabs, horned crabs, and velvet scotters, which makes it even more exciting. And if you're lucky, you catch sight of other regulars like great crested grebes, black-necked grebes, widgeons, gadwalls, teals, pochards, tufted ducks, golden eyes, and common mergansers throughout the winter. Of course, this all assuming the lake doesn't freeze over.
For the lake to freeze over completely, you need a really cold summer, strong easterly winds, and a very chilly autumn and winter. Under those conditions, the lake can actually freeze all the way through by January or February.
Since 1573, whenever the political situation and the ice were strong enough to hold a crowd, there's been a big event called the Ice Procession to celebrate this rare occurrence. During the procession, the bust of St. John the Apostle is carried from one side of the lake to the other, going back and forth between the monastery in Münsterlingen and Altnau in Germany. Once it arrived, the bust would stay there until the lake froze again, and then it would be transported back across.
This used to happen more often, but since the last complete freeze was back in 1963, the bust has been kept locked up in a vault in the parish church of Münsterlingen. With climate change and all, who knows how long it will stay there. There's a replica of the bust at the church entrance, and the original is only displayed on the altar during Saturday services and every fourth Sunday of the month. The pier in Altnau is the longest one in the entire lake, stretching an impressive 270 meters. It was built in 2010 and is designed to meet the highest standards to protect the delicate ecological environment it intersects. And not only that, you get a wonderful view of the mountains from here on the one side, and if I turn around, you get a wonderful view of Constance somewhere back there, and behind that are the volcanic mountains of the Hegau that you can even see today. And this is something you can rarely see in summer because the air needs to be very dry.
there are apple orchards, home to varieties like Jana Gold, Galas and Breburns, which are much appreciated for their quality and flavour, contributing to the area's reputation as a prime apple growing region in Switzerland. For those interested in exploring the apple orchards and learning more about the apple growing heritage of the area, the Altnau Apple Trail provides an informative and scenic journey through this fruitful landscape.
As you've probably noticed, our route runs right alongside a railway line. There are 10 stops over just 20 kilometers, which means you can hop on a train roughly every 2. Trains run every half hour in both directions, and some even more frequently. Of course, cycling is the way to go for the full experience, but you never know when you might run into some trouble. If your bike breaks down or if you get caught in the rain, taking the train for part of the trip could be a convenient and easy option. You don't need a reservation for your bike, but remember, you will need to buy an extra ticket for it, as bike transport isn't free in Switzerland. We've branched off the route for a moment here. Anybody familiar with psychology has probably heard of Carl Gustav Jung. He was a close friend of Sigmund Freud, who was also one of his biggest mentors. Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist, a psychotherapist, psychologist, and evolutionary theorist who founded the School of Analytical Psychology. As a professor, prolific author, illustrator, and correspondent, his influence is still felt in modern science.
Despite all his achievements, though, The small village of Kesswil doesn't really make a big deal about him being born here. Whether that's down to typical Swiss modesty or because he was a complex and controversial figure, we'll leave for you to decide. Still, there is a plaque on the house where he was born to commemorate him and a street named after him.
So, like I mentioned before when we were in Altnau, you have to have very dry air to have a beautiful view of the Alps. And where we are standing here, you can see in the background, I hope you can see in the background, are the white capped mountains. And what you can see there is not really the eastern Swiss Alps, but formerly Austrian Alps, Bavarian Alps in the background. And then there's a fun fact here. Where we're standing here, you can sort of make out the end of the other side of the lake, something you can't do when you're in Constance, because the lake is so long that the other end is hidden below the horizon because of the curvature of the planet. So that's further proof that the flat earthers are wrong. So as you can see, it'll soon be dark. So after a long and action-packed day showing you all these wonderful sights, we're going to call it a day for the moment, but we'll be back to you at the end of this sentence. Looks like our magic wand here has lost all its powers. Serves as a drinking water reservoir for 4 million people, supplying places as far away as Munich. But of course, we won't have to travel that far to get a taste ourselves and can refill our bottles at this fountain here. The water we're drinking was extracted from a depth of 60 meters and pumped to this treatment plant, where it's sterilized and filtered for 2.5 hours before getting distributed to be used as tap water.
The water of the lake is not only used for consumption, but is also a source of energy for the town of Romanshorn. Warm water is taken from the lake at a depth of up to 40 meters and sent through a pipe to a special station near the shore. There, a machine called a heat exchanger extracts the energy and it gets fed into a closed system that pumps warm water into the town. Buildings connected to this system use the water for heating and then send it back to the lake once it's used. A great idea!
These advanced technologies help to reduce water waste. Each year, 2.5 billion litres of water are processed this way, which only changes the lake's water level by about 5 millimeters. But surprisingly, the advanced water management doesn't extend to the lake itself, for it is the only lake in Switzerland with an unregulated flow of water, so the water level can vary depending on the weather and the season. In winter, the water levels are comparably low as the inflow of water is retained in the form of snow higher up in the Alps. In spring, when thawing commences and rain is more likely, the water level usually rises and flooding is not uncommon. But with a changing climate, seasonal variations are becoming somewhat unpredictable.
arrived in Romanshorn, our final destination of this trip.
For centuries, Romanshorn didn't differ much from the villages we passed through on the way to get here, until a port was built in 1844, leading the postal route through here and morphing the hamlet into a transport hub.
In 1855, a railway line was built connecting the Lake of Constance to Switzerland's economic centre of Zurich. And in 1869, this line was extended all the way over to Friedrichshafen, facing the other side of the lake in Germany.
This feat was astoundingly accomplished by using ferries complete with rails, so the trains could simply roll on and off at the ports. The combined use of rail and ship was maintained until 1976.
Now the ferry is used for road vehicles and taking a bike aboard is easy. The journey typically takes about 45 minutes, providing passengers with beautiful views of the lake and surrounding areas.
Which is something you can focus on as we cycle back home. Let's hope we see some of the sun.
But stay with us, because we have a very important question we'd like to ask you at the end. And before that, we're getting to the most exciting part.
Yes, that's right, because we're awarding points and that's always very fun.
So, it's time to draw a conclusion. What sets this route apart from others? Are there any areas for improvement? And apart from the places you should see, what else should you be aware of?
What set this route apart from others? The atmosphere of the lake and the ever-changing hues depending on the time of day, weather and season give this route a unique charm. One day, the mellow landscape and smooth, reflective waters can be soothing, and the next, daunting skies can paint a picture of gloom. When the fog of inversion prevails in winter, it can feel heart-warmingly depressing, offering consolation through times of solitude and contemplation. There's a way lot more to this route than you would suspect at first glance, if you are willing to stop, spend time to look around, and embrace the surroundings. This is also a perfect route for kids, who typically cycle shorter distances and need more resting areas than adults usually do. With so many playgrounds and safe shores for bathing and swimming at hand, there are many further options to entertain kids if they get fed up with cycling. Also, having the train nearby as a backup is an additional bonus.
Things to be aware of. On sunny weekend days and holidays, the route can get quite busy, especially when temperatures are moderately high. If it gets warm, the locals refrain from cycling and going swimming instead. On weekdays, this isn't much of a problem. If you're coming from abroad and don't have any Swiss francs, you can often use euros instead. But watch out for disadvantageous exchange rates and don't expect coins to get accepted. Change for your payments will usually only be handed out in Swiss francs. Also, finding a spot to camp or a hotel with free vacancy might be difficult in the high season. And don't try camping in the wild. Swiss laws are very restrictive, and as there are many people that live in close proximity, chances you will get into trouble are very probable.
Areas for improvement. It is unfortunate that not all of the path is paved. That would upgrade the sections through the parks in Kreuzlingen and Romanshorn. Some parts of the route are too narrow to cycle next to each other. There are several intersections with potential dangers if users aren't paying attention. The section in Kreuzlingen leading into Constance needs a redesign. Signs for reaching services like toilets or village centres with shops or mechanics would be helpful. Also, an overview of all the services could be installed, helping to plan your trip as you go, improving passive communication. Distance markers would help for orientation. Markings to follow the path of way through villages could be improved, giving a more intuitive orientation and serving as a warning to motorists when streets are shared. Some dedicated infrastructure like pump and repair stations would be appealing. Also, we didn't come across any public charging points for e-bikes, and installing some would make this route up to date. Also, toilets and access to rest areas and other points of interest should be indicated, so that they don't go unnoticed. Trying to find a route from the train stations in Kreuzlingen is difficult, and there is no dedicated infrastructure to access the cycle route. A general concept to integrate the route into the surrounding areas, making safe and intuitive access, is much needed.
Ratings. So, and now for the most exciting part, where we award points for the different criteria a recommendable cycle route should meet. We'll start with the landscape and atmosphere. Certainly no complaints here, but there is more stunning scenery in other places, so we can't award full points. We'll give it an 8 out of 10. Surface. The quality is generally of the high standard you can expect in Switzerland, without major bumps or any potholes. However, the absence of pavement on some sections leaves a small dent on the path to perfection. We give it a 7.5 out of 10. Safety. Apart from the messy situation in Kreuzlingen and Romanshorn, there are too many hidden dangers to award a higher mark in this area. Many of the issues should get addressed by the authorities. After all, it's not as if the Swiss wouldn't have the financial resources to set these issues right. We'll give it a 6 out of 10. Services. Apart from a few random makeshift signs put up by some of the villagers, cyclists are left to do their own research into where services are available. More effort could be put into communicating services cyclists might be interested in. We give it a 7 out of 10. Continuity and simplicity. This is a bit of a mixed bag, as the route frequently switches between dedicated cycle paths and shared spaces, interrupting fluidity. You can see that the design of the route evolved by retrofitting bits and pieces together as an afterthought rather than with a comprehensive master plan in mind. We give it a 6 out of 10. Infrastructure. The route relies on infrastructure which was installed without cyclists in mind. For example, there is a number of public toilets along the route, but it is basically impossible to spot them. Or rest areas like bicycle racks for parking. Cyclists aren't specifically addressed in any way, as if they didn't seem to matter. We give it a 3.5 out of 10. Accessibility. This is another weak point, because it is impossible to pinpoint where to access the route without using a map or bike navigation app. Even the routes branching off have no indication that they link up to this major international route. We give it a 4 out of 10. Suitability for families. If only the safety issues were remedied. Then we could give this route full marks for families, as it offers a variety of entertaining stops for kids. We'll give it an 8 out of 10.
So, and now we'll come to the conclusions. This route gets a 6.2 out of 10, and we're curious to see how it compares to other cycle routes. We tried to make an objective evaluation, but as everyone has their own experience and judgment, we'd also be curious if you would come to the same conclusions, especially if you have cycled this route yourself before. We've made a video explaining the criteria we used to base our analysis and how we weighted, so click on the link in the description below if you want to know more. Don't get discouraged by the comparably poor rating. This is a well-established route which mainly loses points due to its reliance on past success, so it doesn't quite meet the standards set by newer routes in terms of safety or infrastructure. But because it has many strong points and some excellent sections, it's a bit of a mixed bag to evaluate. That said, this is the perfect route for beginners and families alike, because, with a few small exceptions, it is mainly flat, there are many attractive places to rest, and the nearby train offers a flexible backup. But basically anyone could enjoy this route, boasting lovely scenic views of the lake and sometimes even of the Alps.
Oh great, we made it back to the start in record time. But unfortunately we didn't see much of the sun.
That's fine with me, because I fancy a hot tea now. But now that we said everything we can about this lovely cycle route, it's your turn to say what you think. Do you agree with our verdict? Would you recommend the Lake Constance Cycle Route? Which other cycle routes would you recommend? We would really enjoy reading your comments and thoughts.
And besides that, we've put a lot of effort into producing this video. Granted, it might be a bit long, but as we pointed out, this is the first time we've made a video like this, so we're sure we have our own areas for improvement. But we'd be thrilled if you would simply smash that like button if you think we deserve recognition. We're aiming at 100 likes, so every one counts.
But our main goal was to provide you with useful and entertaining information, convey the atmosphere, and hopefully inspire you to try traveling by bike, if you're not already hooked, that is. So please also share this with anyone who might be interested in cycling along this path. We would appreciate 1,000 views for our effort, which is modest by YouTube standards. So sharing this video would be really helpful.
But whatever the case, it was really fun making this video, and with spring approaching, we will soon be off on our own trips. So we're definitely going to follow up with further reports. So please subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more reports on Europe's best cycling routes and other cycling related topics.
So we hope to see you soon.
Until then, thanks for watching
and
bye bye.
Happy cycling!